Similarly, Marjorie Taylor Greene, that was so outlandish that the Russians picked it up, and she is a star on Russian TV because they want to use that bit of misinformation.
Unfortunately, there has been this situation with Marjorie where she is a bully, and no one ever responds. And so the idea was she would just get away with it again. And for me, correct, she basically just mimics Trump.
Marjorie Taylor Greene is catching flack from everybody these days, not merely just Democratic superstars Jasmine Crockett and Maxwell Frost, but also a legendary Republican operative who talks smack about her on air on the Fox Propaganda Network, and we have to talk about it. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bell before you go. All right, friends, it's always fun to pick on Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's emblematic of what the Republican Party has regressed into, an authoritarian cult of personality with no limiting principle and no talent for or interest in responsible governance. She's a very high-profile, very influential Republican, and she has the favor of Donald Trump in a lot of respects, and she's a pretty good fundraiser for them, all things considered. So she can't be considered an outlier. And yet, even seasoned legendary Republican operatives, we're going to start with him, like Karl Rove. This was a senior policy advisor to President Bush. He's been a Fox News staple for decades. Even he is so fed up with her that he feels the need to call out many of her MAGA lies. I'm going to show this most recent clip here in which he calls her out on the Fox Propaganda Network on air.
Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that boilerplate language that's normally in a federal search warrant meant that Joe Biden wanted to assassinate Donald Trump during the search of Mar-a-Lago, and that the FBI was ready to take fire and take aim and fire away. I mean, please, that was so outlandish that the Russians picked it up, and she is a star on Russian TV because they want to use that bit of misinformation to paint us in a wrong fashion. So when the winner of this election,
for Karl Rove to come out and say this, again, this guy was known as kind of like the Darth Vader of the Bush administration, along with like Dick Cheney, right? They were like the sinister men in black robes cackling in the background. This guy is no moderate. He's no friend of the Democrats, but he's also someone who's competent and seems to despise incompetence, which is why he's been publicly critical, certainly of Marjorie Taylor Greene, but even Donald Trump as well. Now, it's before I turn to Jasmine Crockett, who recently appeared on The View, I think it's also worth noting to just revisit that conspiracy theory. That conspiracy theory that President Biden was somehow trying to assassinate Donald Trump by using the FBI, when the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago, they executed a properly executed a search warrant, which was legally obtained. Fox News signal boosted that. And not just the crazies on Fox News or the open crazies like Jesse Waters and Sean Hannity and others, also the straight news component, the hard news component, people like Brett Baer and even Maria Bartiromo, who has a foot in both worlds. But they signal boosted this irresponsibly. So I think it's also funny that Karl Rove felt the need to address that conspiracy theory was ridiculous. You'll also note that none of the Fox News hosts to whom he was speaking, like Dana Perino and Bill Hemmer and others, felt the need to say, actually, yeah, Karl, I just want to put a point on it. That really was ridiculous, that conspiracy theory, and anyone who peddled it should be ashamed of themselves. Again, it's worth noting that Trump's own attorneys were arguing in front of the Supreme Court that presidents effectively have the right to assassinate political rivals. So it's kind of funny to me that their ridiculous view of presidential power and immunity seems to clash with their conspiracy theory, because if what they say is true here, then they shouldn't have a problem with the conspiracy theory if it were true, because Biden would be well within his rights to try to assassinate a political rival whom he deems to be a threat to the nation. But of course, it's ridiculous. Biden didn't do that. Trump wasn't even there at Mar-a-Lago at the time. The same boilerplate language that Karl Rove mentions was also included in the consensual search of President Biden's Delaware home. So was Biden trying to assassinate himself? None of that makes sense whatsoever. But again, good on Karl Rove for calling out Marjorie Taylor Greene's stupidity. And speaking of Marjorie Taylor Greene's stupidity and calling it out, nobody in the country is better than that, I would argue, than Jasmine Crockett, freshman Democrat from Texas. She recently appeared on The View, and she talked at length with the members of The View about her thoughts on Marjorie and why she approaches Greene much more ruthlessly than most Democrats do.
So
Which was the point of you calling that out, though, because that was the rule in that room, that they should have stopped her.
Correct. So the thing was, Comer was given an opportunity to decide how he was going to conduct hearings going forward.
Right.
The reality is that there can be a complete devolution of this process, or you can get it under control. Unfortunately, there has been this situation with Marjorie where she is a bully, and no one ever responds. And so the idea was she would just get away with it again. And for me, correct, she basically just mimics Trump. And because she mimics Trump, she is one of their top fundraisers. Of course. Period. She is the 5th highest fundraising member of the Republican Party, behind those in leadership, because she is rewarded for her antics and for the destruction of our institution. These are people that not only were saying on January 6th, let's literally physically tear down the institution, but we have people that are tearing our institution apart from within. And that is a problem. And see, the thing is, it's not about partisanship at all. It's about respect. And it's about making sure that you're doing the work of the people. I will work with anybody that wants to make this a better country, and we don't have to agree on everything. But where we can find common ground, let's get to work and stop doing this ridiculousness.
She's so good at what she does. I love the fact that she pointed out again that Marjorie Taylor Greene is not an outlier. She's one of their best fundraisers. She is rewarded for her antics by Donald Trump and by the Republican base, and that she felt the need to call it out and to push back. It's absolutely true. You don't discourage, you don't deter, you don't squash the bad faith of Republicans by simply just ignoring it, right? Feckless Democrats have tried that again and again and again over the years. I would argue in many instances, President Obama, as well-intentioned as he was much too guilty of adhering to the Michelle Obama ethic, which is that when they go low, we go high. It's a beautiful sentiment, but that's not the prevailing logic of American politics, and Republicans have shown no capacity for shame or chastisement or the willingness to pull back in the face of good faith, in the face of grace and dignity from the opposing side. So good on Representative Crockett for pointing out that actually, no, we need to push back to show that we're not going to be bullied. And in fact, we will be willing to bully the bullies. And this is actually something I talked about recently during my interview with Representative Crockett's peer, a fellow freshman Democratic superstar, Maxwell Frost of Florida, because he is also one of the ones bringing the heat and the fire, not just against Marjorie Taylor Greene in particular, although he has, but also Republicans in general. And this is what he had to say about that change in the paradigm. You and your fellow freshman Democrats seem to be bringing, I say the word aggression, but I mean it in the best possible sense. Like you're making the case, you're bringing the fight, you're bringing the fire, and we see it in these House Oversight Committee hearings. Do you think it's important to change the way Democrats approach power? Is it a concerted effort? Because I'll tell you from the outside, it looks like you all coordinate this like impeccably. Like you were like, you know what, we're going to have the freshman Democrats Avengers here, and we're going to make a full court press. So can you talk about that?
Well, yeah. Well, yes, I do agree on this. And it's interesting. When I first got to Congress, I thought, wow, I'm going to be a part of these huge ideological debates, progressives versus moderates battling it out as Democrats for the soul of the party, which, we're in the minority. It could be a lot more of that in the majority. But I'll tell you, most of the debates, arguments, and kind of struggle I've been a part of within the party has not really been about, progressive versus moderate, more about what's the style of governance, what's the tactic we're going to take, the strategy, how aggressive are we going to be? That's more of the debate, which creates kind of these interesting coalitions of, very, moderate folks who want to be more aggressive and progressives, and on the other end too. And so that's, I think is very interesting. I think we do need to be more aggressive about leveraging and utilizing power as a party for a couple reasons. Number one, this is if we want to get to the transformational change we need, our system of government demands the aggressiveness in order for us to get to where we want to go, or else we'll never get there. And this is, I believe, democracy is the best system, and I believe in democracy. But democracy also sets out a timeline where your accomplishments could be aggressively rolled back in just 4 years. And that's the push and pull of democracy. And I think it is the right system. But the system also demands, if you believe in bold transformational change, that you move quickly and you move fast when the stars align for you. And the stars rarely align. And they're going to align less and less. Studies show, not even studies about what's going to happen. Look at what's happened the last 10 years. The amount of frontline seats, what I mean by frontline are seats that are battleground congressional seats, has gone down exponentially. There are way less competitive seats than there were 10 years ago. Why? Because of gerrymandering and more of a polarized society, which means that the House of Representatives and control of Congress will flip more often. And what that means is that having all three branches of government for a party will become more and more of a rarity. Some may argue that's a good thing. As a Democrat that wants universal health care, I don't think that's a good thing, especially when the Republican Party, unfortunately, right now is being led by a far right neo-fascist like Donald Trump. I don't think that's a good thing. And so because our system works this way, it demands that for us to get what we need, the second we have those stars aligned, we need to move aggressively fast. And that's why I always say this isn't just about a Democratic majority. It's about a governing majority. We had a Democratic majority 2 years ago. And granted, I wasn't in Congress, but the president and Congress got a lot done. Objectively, one of the most successful 2 years in a presidency that we've seen this country since probably FDR. And so I think that the record is great. But we did not have a governing majority for the entirety of the president's agenda due to a couple of Democrats. So that's why I always like to say we need the Democratic majority, but more importantly, we need the governing majority as Democrats. And I think that our party's changing, and I think we're getting to a place where we like it. I mean, look at all these new Senate candidates, Ruben Gallego and Andy Kim. These are folks who, they have progressive ideology. They might not be like the most left or anything, but guess what? They are for moving aggressively. They're for getting rid of the filibuster. They're for passing big, bold transformational legislation that'll help us do what we need to do. That's huge. As far as oversight is concerned, we do meet regularly. But also our fearless leader. I mean, think about this. Just think about our side here. Our leader is Jamie Raskin. Our vice-ranking member on that committee is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And then we have some of the most badass Democrats on that committee. Now look at the other side. They're led by James Comer, who doesn't know what he's doing. They're directed pretty much by Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, and it's just wild. So, I spoke with some of the Republicans in that committee. Apparently, they never meet or coordinate anything. We meet, we coordinate. It's part of the reason why we shut down the sham impeachment of the president very quickly.
So yeah, for my money, I'm completely with Representative Frost and Representative Crockett and Representative Goldman and Moskowitz. AOC, again, I think, even though she's not a freshman Democrat, she's not quite the elder statesman that Jamie Raskin is. She's been in office less, but she, I think, was also a major firebrand leading the way of pushing back on this rhetoric from GOP and showing some grit. And this freshman class is taking that playbook and running with it. And I think it's a self-feeding loop where they energize off one another. And I hope that if and when Democrats take the majority in this election in the House of Representatives, they continue to bring the heat and the fire against the Republicans and not devolve and become feckless Democrats and rest on their laurels. The GOP, under this MAGA authoritarian cult, is not going to allow them. They're not going to abate. They're not going to stop. And so I think Democrats have to show their constituents, show their voters that when they have power, they will continue to bring the fight and the grit and on behalf of the American people who desperately need it. Let me know what you think in the comments.